Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined today not only by my good friend and co-host Mark Etheridge, we're also joined by Mississippi State head baseball coach Chris Lemonis. We're excited to talk a lot of things with Coach. We're going to talk about his team specifically, his team coming out of the fall. We're also going to touch on some big picture topics around college baseball. It's always a time of year where Mark and I like to kind of just talk through some of the changes in college baseball, and having a coach's perspective is obviously a big deal. So we're going to get to that in just a second. But first, I have to let you know that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Pitch Logic, the system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from youth leagues to the big leagues. The easy to use and affordable technology makes the platform accessible to every player at every level. All the metrics and features used at the highest level. See pitchlogic.com for more information. First off, Coach, appreciate you joining us today and making a little time for us.
No, I love it. We appreciate all that you guys do promoting the game, and it's this time of year it gets a little slow for us. I need something to do.
Well, we're happy to oblige, but you're right. I mean, this time of year, kind of between, even for us, we're obviously not working as hard as y'all do, but this time of year between Thanksgiving and Christmas is kind of I think of it as the period of time when we shift our focus from summer and fall ball and looking back and figuring things out to kind of looking forward and getting serious, about
I think so. I
what's
agree.
coming down the
It's
pike.
a little bit of downtime. Our guys are going everywhere, just seeing family and
Yeah.
hanging out, and I call it the recharge. Trying
Yeah.
to get recharged. And every year I end up on New Year's Day, me and my wife getting in the car and driving back to Starkville, and it's like, all right, here we go. And so we got a couple weeks to enjoy.
Let's look back real quick before we head forward, Coach. Being that you're done with the fall now, have been for a little bit, what are your kind of your takeaways? What do you take away from the fall that that stands out to you about this fall practice period?
Yeah, I like our group. These teams are so different than the past because you have a lot of new guys, and you have a lot of new impactful guys with the portal, with the JUCOs, with the freshmen. I thought we brought in a lot of good players. We've created good depth on our team on both sides of the ball. I think that's really important. We're still trying to figure out some things, but I think it's a good competitive figuring out, trying to figure out where some guys go. I think the biggest piece for us, it was the same thing last year, and we ended up probably with the best 1 and 2, or one of the best 1 and 2 in the country, with Cal Steven and Lowe. But we're trying to figure out who that Friday, Saturday guy is, who's going to be able to step up and be that first guy out the bullpen on a weekend. And I think those are the, probably biggest question marks for our team right now.
Coach, you mentioned all of the different, it's really not anything that's specific to you, but across the country, just rosters. You have basically a new roster every year. So there's only so much of that you can do as a staff. How do you build that or sustain that culture? How do you get the leadership part of it done? How can you be a player-led team as opposed to having to dictate everything? What's the secret sauce there?
I don't know if there's a secret sauce, but there's a lot of effort that goes into it, and we're not done. Mm-hmm. I think there's time we get back after the holidays, but we went down about mid-October to Birmingham and played UAB, mm-hmm. and usually we just drive down and drive back. And I made sure we let me stop the phone. I made sure on the bus there I did a seating assignments with like an older guy, Hunter Hines, with the freshmen, and when we got there, they had roommate assignments, which were totally different of what they would regularly be. We go play Top Golf. We, pick teams like I literally at one point in the fall, one of the kids says, "Man, that guy's really good. He's going to help us," and what's his name? After like 2 weeks of being on campus, and I'm like, "Oh crap," man, we got to do a really good job here because, it's just honest, it's real, and you don't get to know each other like you do if you played together 3 or 4 years. And so, I really speak to my portal guys. We have 7 mm-hmm. portal guys, which is a lot for us, but like you're the oldest guys on the team. You've experienced more than everybody else. You have a leadership role as big as many because some of these guys that are here that are really good players, they haven't had the opportunity to do it yet. So I tell them all the time I'm the captain, so I don't put that on anybody right now. So y'all just have the opportunity to play. But there is a player-driven piece on the field, away from the field, I think that's important in a good program, and we have to continue to work to develop that.
I want to pull on that thread actually a little bit more there. On the position player side, there's a lot of turnover there. You return Hunter and some others, but did anything stand out with the position player group specifically as you exited the fall? Guys that you felt kind of took on a leadership role and maybe became someone who you could see being someone like that in the spring, whether it's a guy who's been around or a transfer portal guy or whatever?
Well, I tell you, one guy that really stepped up from the leadership side is Noah Sullivan, our big transfer portal kid from USC Upstate. Not only is he a really good player, he's a two-way player. He's going to do a lot for us, but he's like that old soul kind of, so you kind of got this. He's a dude, very competitive, but knows how to handle it. I mean, we got an old position player group, and a little bit of that's portal, but we had two starters out the whole year almost last year that are two of the better players in the country, and Dylan Cupp, who was the Team USA shortstop and played every game until opening night of the SEC play, blew his knee out against LSU. And he's it's a special player. And then Ross Highfield had blew out his arm this time last year. And we feel like he maybe is one of the better catchers in the country. And those were guys that were in the middle of our mix. So you get them back. We get Hunter back through the draft because he got pissed off about the 8th round. So he ends up back in school. So we got some really good pieces there. But Noah Sullivan's one just from a leadership side that you can lean on. But
you're having to rebuild your rotation pretty much. You're losing some really good guys. Who are the top candidates heading into the spring?
What was fortunate for us is Pico, Khan, and he was actually supposed to be our Friday night starter last year and had this, had surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So we run him out there, championship game of that Charlottesville regional, and he's 92-94 for 7 innings. And we got the lead, in Charlottesville. So we feel like that's a prime candidate. He got calls in the 3rd round. You're talking about close to $1 million to sign, and felt like he had, wanted to come back. Carson Ligon was another kid who kind of had an up and down year for us last year, but kind of fixed it at the end of the year. Spent a lot of time with Justin Parker, and he went out to the Cape. He was up to 100 in the Cape, and had a really good fall for us this fall. He's been about 96, 97, 98, and you're talking about a 22-year-old guy who could have signed for a couple $100,000 last year. And then we have Stone Simmons as a kid. We've had him for a couple years and has bounced around with some injuries, but he was, big body, 94, 96 this fall. So those 3 guys are just 3 of the returners we had, and older kids. And then, Jacob Pruitt was a big transfer portal guy for us, maybe the top arm there at Indiana State. And he was really good this fall too. So you got we feel like trying to figure out those pieces of that, weekend rotation is huge because bullpen wise, we have a lot of compliments in there and a lot of different looks. We feel like we can really pitch there if we can get good 5-inning starts out of some of these guys, some of these older guys.
How important is it, speaking of the bullpen, when you and Coach Parker kind of starting to take a look at how the pieces fit together, how important is it to think about different looks and not just stuff? Because think about, you use Cam Schulke a lot last couple of years. You brought in Hungate this year out of the transfer portal, who's just a different look guy. Yeah. So obviously you have to have stuff to get outs. I get it. But how much do you guys think about how different do all of our pieces look from each other?
When I had to hire Coach Parker, you bring in these pitching coaches in and they're breaking down your staff. And, probably to our fault, we had a lot of ride and a lot of slider, and it worked. I mean, 2021, probably the best pitching staff in the country. And Landon and Will and all those guys, that was kind of what they were. But we made a real conscious effort to move around. Kevin Monell was like the number 2 or 3 JUCO player in the country, and it's sidearm 90-94. Dane Burns is a big 6'4" lefty we brought in that's like got a 3,100 mile an hour, RPM slider, that from the left side. So you're trying to find those pieces. Shoot, we thought we'd have Schulke back with Hungate and Monell. I don't know what we'd have done with all the sidearmers, but I think in 2013, we played in Mississippi State played in the national championship game with all those sidearmers. So, looks was really big for us. We feel like we can do that as good as anybody right now.
You mentioned earlier there's still some things you need to figure out. What's the focus going to be once you get back to kind of solidify where your lineup's going to be?
I think that lineup's going to be a moving part a lot of the year. I think there's some different pieces there. One of the best kids that we had, one of our big portal guys was Ace Reese. I don't know if you've heard much about Ace. Probably led us in every offensive category. Big left-handed hitter, third baseman, recruited by pretty much everybody. I think he's a guy that we're looking at. I got to figure out how we're building that lineup 3, 4, 5. You got Hunter Hines back. Noah Sullivan had double-digit homers and hit 3-something. Ross Highfield's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. There's a lot of power. He had 9 homers as a freshman, but he's also about a 6'4" runner, and so as a catcher, and a guy that can
Mm-hmm.
move. I think he can do some neat things for us. And then, we got some guys like Nolan Stevens is a very dynamic player. He's 92 to 95 off the bump, left-handed, and he was an all-star in Newport this summer. A 6'4"
Mm-hmm.
left-handed hitting outfielder. He had a really good fall for us, offensively. So, there's really, we got some neat pieces in there that we can move around, and probably a couple guys in that second base area too that we could have. Sawyer Reeves and Garrick Fry were 2 transfers we brought in. Ethan Pulliam played there a lot last year, so we got some guys that can do some damage. I like our offense, and we can match up with you, left to right, pretty good.
In the big picture, how hungry is this team, given that last year's team kind of got back moving in the right direction where this program expects to be? How hungry does that make the returners and the guys joining to take that next step for you guys?
Well, I think I can speak for the returners and the coach. It's kind of a pissed off mentality in a good way. I think we felt like we got screwed in regional host with our quad 1 wins. And I'm sure there's more things that we could have done, but at the end of the year, we were one of the better teams in the country, and we had proved it. I mean, we finished 5th in the SEC, and we arguably had the hardest or second hardest schedule in the league. And then we went out there and played really well. We had a slow start with a ton of injuries the first 2 weeks. So we had a couple bad losses in there that hang on to you. Now, that's part of it. I understand building a resume, but this group's pretty pissed. I mean, they want to get back to hosting. They want to get back to Omaha. I really feel like we have that kind of type of group because there's so much experience in the talent level. Like I said, it just comes down to playing well. So,
well, you think back the last 5 years, so many changes in the sport, right? The portal, the NIL, realignment, all of this stuff has happened. One, how has that changed? I assume it's changed. How has that changed how you build a roster with an eye toward getting a balance between developmental and then guys who can help you right away?
Man, it's hard. That's the hardest part of our job right now. We spend more time building roster, recruiting. It goes into so many different, like I said, it's portal, it's high school, it's JUCO, it's because right now with a 34-man roster, you got to feel like somebody's going to show up and has to be able to play right away. I know that sounds bad, and there should be development on top of that. But the reality of, I played at the Citadel for a Hall of Fame coach, Chow Port, and he used to give a speech about the smokehouse, and certain meats sat in the smokehouse longer than others. He about burnt me because I sat in there for about a couple of years, right? But I ended up being a player. In year 3, I ended up being a good player for the Citadel. And but it took me a couple of years. Dan McDonald started every day as a freshman. So you got, you got different guys that, we played with. But I think the hardest part right now is, and especially when they threw it on us in the middle of this year, I think everybody dealing with rosters right now, trying to, and we still don't know how many scholarships, how many, all these different pieces. We just don't know right now. It's a really tough time. And, I try to just be as honest with our guys as I can and try to put them in the best situations. Doesn't always feel like it, but you're trying to help the kid as much as they can.
That's probably the most Chalport thing I've ever heard. The smokehouse metaphor. That sounds exactly.
It works for Mississippi State because, man, we barbecue everything here.
That's true. Yeah, the ballpark smells like a smokehouse.
Yeah.
How has it's been a lot of change in college baseball? But if you look at yourself, if you kind of turn inward and look back at, Chris Lemonis 5 years ago versus where you are now, is there any way in which the way you have to operate now has made you a better coach?
Yeah, I think so. It's had to make you work harder. I think there's a piece of, the SEC coaches are, man, if you're not out there on the ground with everybody, especially in the portal war, it used to be we'd sign them so early, they'd come to camp, you'd have this big class, you'd watch them go. And then now it's not that. I mean, you have to be out there. We're recruiting the junior, and you have to be out at their games. You have to be involved in the recruitment at a higher level than you've ever had to be. And so I think same with the portal. I mean, I'd leave my house in the summertime with a bag. My wife asked me where I was going. I said, I'm not sure yet. And, there's nights that I just got on a plane and flew to Boston or flew somewhere else. And it's just you have to be prepared for it. And my background's in recruiting. I think one reason I'm here is I was a pretty good recruiter during the years. And so I've just embraced it. But it is a tougher dynamic.
Well, the SEC has had, I don't know, an incredible run and there's no looking back at this point. And now Texas and Oklahoma, who are your first 2 opponents conference play, they joined the league. I mean, just thoughts on that, and what those two programs coming into this party is going to do in this conference.
Well, at least we took bad programs. I mean, I like that about the SEC, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's I grew up in Texas, so everybody
Mhm.
knows about Texas, and Skip does a great job at Oklahoma. So you got two great programs joining us, and I was kind of excited at first getting out of the West because the West was so hard for years, and God dang, I hated going to Arkansas. So maybe it doesn't happen as
Mhm.
much anymore, but yeah, adding those guys in, having Texas here that first. I mean, is there a bigger weekend in college baseball than that weekend? Probably than
Mhm.
them coming to the biggest stage in college baseball. So I'm sure it'll be a crazy weekend, a packed weekend. Our fans are talking about it already, and then us having the opportunity to go to Oklahoma. My first 3 weeks are, I think we play Texas at home, go to Oklahoma, and then go to Baton Rouge. So they gave us the easy one. So,
Hmm.
but it'll be a lot of fun.
One of the other changes in the league is using availability reports. We've seen how this has happened in football and the sports that are already in play. Any thoughts on that change, and how do you anticipate this kind of maybe changing things, if at all, really, come the season?
Yeah. I'm still like trying to figure it out, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm sure my trainer has a better idea than me.
Mhm.
We're pretty transparent, so I've never played the game of any of that type of stuff. But you haven't had to, sometimes I'm scared talking to the guy, asking him how he feels because I just want him to say I'm good, coach.
You want good news,
So
yeah.
coach, give it to me. I got two. Like so. Um, it'll take some getting used to, I think, for all of us. I think that's it just shows you the popularity of our sport and how important our sport is. That we do have to get into this world because a lot of sports. I think it's just us and basketball and football, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
and that are making do them. So it'll be a little bit more. I haven't, like I said, I haven't dove into it too much at this point.
Mhm. Another big picture topic here: postseason. Are there changes that you would like to see, whether it's to the format, to the selection criteria, to should a committee be the one who have sometimes their work for a university?
Yeah.
What do you think? Are there ways that we can improve this?
I don't know. A non-biased committee. I think that's, I think that's
Mhm.
everybody's trying to do, but it's, you look at that committee, most of that committee is not Power Four based, not for as
Right.
many Power Fours that are you don't have as many Power Four schools. I'm probably saying that, and another AD somewhere else will kill me this spring, but
Yeah.
we control our destiny. I understand that, but you just, having more SEC people in the room, or ACC, or Big Ten, or these leagues that are filling it up. I think it's important because what we go through, you're seeing in the college football model right now. I mean, it's the week to week grind does matter. I mean, there's just no bad teams in our league. I mean, I know, and that's not saying there's not other great teams in other leagues, but going through somebody will say you got a hard schedule or bad, an easy schedule. There's no easy schedule in the SEC. I don't care who you
Mhm.
are. You are going up against great players every week. So I like the format. I like it when we host. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
But I enjoy the tournament format of it. I've been used to it. I know we switched many years ago when it was 48 and went to 64. But I think it's great, and it's great on campus.
My last thing for you, Mark might have something else for you. My
Yeah.
last thing is I'm interested to think back to when you were playing at the Citadel. Obviously, different deal, playing in SoCon as opposed to, the SEC. But, you got the opportunity to see a lot of places, play against a lot of guys. How much has the game changed since you were a player? In what way do you feel like the college baseball is just in a totally different place than when you were on the field?
Well, I think it's the TV side, the exposure of the sport. Got social media, D1 baseball, other places. I think that's the big, we never saw ourselves on TV. We didn't even video ourselves, so you'd have,
Mhm.
like, I think twice in my career we were on TV, which was, you're so excited you played on TV. I think now these guys, they see themselves all the time through video, through clips, they're on TV. You're exposed to so much. And then the popularity across the board, I mean, I'm fortunate I'm in Mississippi. It's always been popular here because of Ron Polk. But you go to these other campuses in the spring. We're the party in the spring everywhere across the SEC. I mean, the campus is all about that home baseball game, and it fills up, and it's a tailgate, and it's growing every year. I mean, look across our league; other teams have grown a lot in the last couple of years in that respect, and I think that's where you see it the most. I think the coach in the game in a lot of ways is the same. The type of ball player that plays college baseball is very similar. I just think it's the exposure of our sport just keeps growing, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Last thing for me, just scheduling philosophy. When you think about how big these conferences are now, and who you miss can be just as important as who you play.
Yes.
Then you have to factor that into, okay, the league is challenging, as we talked about before. What do you need to do in non-conference, right? Because if you go too challenging, you could hurt yourself. But if you don't go challenging enough, maybe they hold that against you, right? So where do you stand on that?
I think you're trying to have a nice balance. I think for
Mhm.
me, I'm trying to go on one trip every year. This year we go to Minute Maid, play in that tournament. We're fortunate. Our mid majors, for the most part, I mean, we go to, I say mid major, like it's not even. We play home and home with Southern Miss, right? Like, I mean, that's
Yeah.
not even a mid major. That's a top 25 team almost every year. Sanford,
Right.
UAB, Memphis. We play Ole Miss. We play 31 SEC games. Like 30 is not
Yeah.
enough, so. I think that really helps us. I feel like in my world, though, I have to build some confidence and let my guys. I know the dude is great, and it's packed and it's intense. We call it the Coliseum, but I have to get my guys used to playing in there too. And I need to get them playing comfortable. And I have so many new ones. It's not like Jake Mangum, who I got my first year. He played hundreds of games there. It's, probably a transfer portal kid who's played in front of 150 kids his whole career. And now there's 14,000 for opening day, and they're ringing cowbells. So I think the key is to win. I think you see that, our league, if you can get out and just win your games, when you lose some of those games that aren't probably at the highest part of the RPI, that's what comes back to get you. So I think you need to have a nice balance. You need to get your team off and running a little bit, because the league is such a gauntlet, and I don't think it can be too easy, but sometimes you can make it too hard. I've done that more than once. And, it just puts some stress on you where, sometimes kids, one of the keys is getting your kid going, getting them off to a good start. And sometimes hopefully you can get them off to a good start.
And how much of that do you take into account, like what the RPI impact is going to be, right? Because the committee is going to look at that versus whose geography, helps you schedule versus, the quality of the program.
Yeah, I think the RPI piece I look at every time. Boyd's World.
Yeah.
Mississippi State guy, so I call him a good bit. So, hey, what do you think if I schedule this, or what hurts me more? So I'm very in tune to it. And John Combs was here; he was very in tune to it. He was on the committee those years, so he got me in touch with them, and that was a big piece. But I think that's an important piece. But also, I think locality. Just being able to drive somewhere and play. I felt it was important. We're going to Southern Miss this year. We have neither one of us have played on campus in like 7 years, and so I felt like that's a good road trip. It should be a great environment, prepares you for some stuff. And we play them early. It's like the first Tuesday of the year, and I'm sure it'll be packed. So it should be a lot of fun. And even those games, but I've kind of moved off the neutral site games. We were playing at AutoZone. We were playing in Hoover. Speaking of y'all's show, we were playing at Hoover, playing the Alabama. And they become neutral site games where if I'm going to go play UAB, I'm going to play UAB on their home campus. So that extra RPI point gets hit in there. And so we still play, we play 2 games down in Biloxi in the AA park with the Shuckers down there. And we play 1 in Pearl, which is the AA park, was the Braves. So we play on some neutral sites. But when I looked up one year, I had like 7 neutral site games, and they weren't in the dude. So, and it makes it, that is impactful to your RPI. So I think that's a piece you got to look at.
Whatever number of tickets they have available for that game in Hattiesburg, it's not going to be enough. I can just about guarantee that.
Yeah, it'll probably be about 40 degrees for a 6 o'clock game. So, and we'll still pack it out. I'm sure there'll be crawfish and everything else being cooked. It'll be a good night. So
yeah, I'll be there
before, just not at Mississippi State. But it should be like I said, we got some big games this year. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a good place to leave the conversation, because I'm excited to see your club in the spring. I know Mark is as well, and you guys have a fun schedule, obviously in the SEC, but leading up to it, some good tests as well. So looking forward to that. Chris Lemonis, appreciate you joining us, giving us some time today ahead of the 2025 season.
Thanks, guys. Have a great holiday. Hail State.
That is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I want to thank Pitch Logic for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. I want to thank Mississippi State head baseball coach Chris Lemonis once again for joining us. Thank Mark for joining me every week, and thank you, the listener, for listening. We'll talk to y'all soon.